and he's going to be talking about log optimisation. And that's his specialty area, and he splits his time between Logistics Limited, Interpine Forestry and Toitutu Whanui. And so he's a registered forestry consultant, and he's a past board member of the Logging Research Institute. And I'm not quite sure what football team he supports, but I think we heard enough about it yesterday. So, Andy, over to you.
Thanks. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm a forestry chap, 30 odd years in the industry, 15 years with the corporate and 15 years subsequently as a privateer. And it's this subject matter, and I consider myself reasonably broad in my forestry knowledge. I've done a lot of different things. This is the thing that excites me most. And so I'm going to give you some insights into some of the questions and particularly some of the opportunities that you guys and your managers are going to face. Strictly, I'm going to be, I follow on well from James's introduction on value recovery methods as a whole, but with some more specific information around the optimisation process. And hopefully I can do it in a way that it's not too technical. And I've got a couple of videos, so that'll help us out. For me, and this, I almost had a Damascus-like experience 13, 14 years ago when I started to understand when New Zealand forestry was at its peak, I would have said, at applied research and development. We've come back off of that peak in subsequent years. But for me, to be able to see how clearly you can convert your standing forest into money and how you could get that potentially wrong, that was quite enlightening, very enlightening. And it all really started, and this one next slide encapsulates it. And back then, here we're talking about a very large industrial estate, which has lots of forests and lots of harvesting crews. And value recovery, and probably a simple way of measuring it, the most accurate way of measuring it, is to think of how much value is standing in your forest the day before you cut it down. And the way we as an industry, as foresters, assess it, we send people out there and we actually take sample tree measurements, and then we match them up with years and years of studied growth model information, particular to that area of forest. We integrate that with the financial information of the day, be it the costs and the revenue. So ultimately, when Roger Dickey type companies, or for your forests, or any other forest owner, when they say, what is our forest worth, they go through a process similar to this. So it's the quality and the quantity of the trees on the ground, it's the costs and revenue of the day, and ultimately, that's the value of the standing forest. The trick then around forest value recovery is converting the value that we think standing into our trees into logs that go to market and ultimately end up in cash in the pocket. Now in this instance, back in those days, obviously I want you to focus on this group here. And this, to my knowledge, is about the only time in New Zealand that we've done this kind of work, where on a monthly basis, we would assess each individual crew as to what value they generated and compared it to the value that we said was standing in the forest of that month. With time, you can even out the variation, because you might, for a month, they might be in a bad part of the forest. This is a rolling 12-month average. And fundamentally, what the chart is saying is that this is how many dollars they underperformed by against the standing value we thought was in that price. Now, most forest owners don't know this because this measure is quite a difficult thing to do. So log value recovery, as James talks about it, there's almost an element of fate that doing all these things right gives you the best chance of getting to where you want to be, which is on that line there. And at $0 means that you're matching the standing value price. So if you like, that was my Damascus moment. And I said, right, we've worked it out. So how did that one crew, or that one business, consistently get close to a standing value? And that's what I've spent a fair bit of the past 14 years working out, buying forests and trying to apply that technology. One of the things you need to do to maximise the value of the forest, James has mentioned it, you need market breadth. If you, when you cut up your standing forest, and you do it according to the markets of the day, and you use in your nominal standing forest 20 different grades of rocks, types of rocks. You mentioned the prune, the big fat variable prune at the lower end of the pole. You want to get, if your forest says there's 20% prune there, that comes with your highest value income. You want to get 20% prune when you cut it up. You don't want 18%, you don't want 16%. So you need to have the space and the ability to cut 20 grades if that's how your forest is being set. It's pointless cutting only 8 grades. What you need to be able to do is optimise. When we value your forest standing up, we use optimisers to do it. We try and work out what's the most value standing in that forest. When you cut your logs up, you should duplicate that process. You should assess the stem in its entirety before you make any decisions as to where you cut. These are the things that I believe in. Value recovery, this art of converting, mostly science, but art, the value standing in your trees into the same value in logs on the ground, optimisation is incredibly important, but one of the outcomes of optimisation and the optimising systems that we can use is that it captures data. And for us as forest owners and forest practitioners, in the myriad variants of a forest, you move from this place to that place, it's raining here, you change settings, you need to know day by day, not month by month, because month by month can be too late. You need to know day by day, am I getting the value out of the forest that I believe to be standing there? Now we know that the costs aren't generally going to change. If you've got a harvest rate of $20, it's going to be there on month 1 as it is on month 3. The trucking rate's fundamentally not going to change because all those prices are set in advance to start. But day by day, the quality of the logs that your logging crew's producing, that can vary. You need to know that. You don't want to find out at the end of your harvest block that you have lost $10 a tonne. If you're losing $10 a tonne and you know it from day one, it gives you the opportunity to do something about it. Just as important, I keep coming back to market breadth. And this is where the Hawkstone East Coast Forest is really well positioned. You guys are in a good position to have the best of a domestic export mix. Unfortunately, there are some forest owners really that just don't have the domestic options, and so you're just exposed to the vagaries of the export market. The bottom one's important, and that's what we founded our business on. The forest owner has the huge vested interest in merchandising, and merchandising is just making the logs. So you've got your trees standing there, it's to your benefit to have the most valuable logs made. You need to control that process, and this is my view, rather than have that entirely up to the contractor. His motivations actually aren't the same as yours, and they'll become a bit perilous to go through. If you recall that chart, and I'll keep that kind of set me on the way into thinking this way and trying to work out why that crew lost so little value, and now we understand incredibly well. We've tried to replicate that in our business over the past 14 years. And because making logs is such a destructive process, once you've converted a tree into logs, you can't retrospectively, if you like, say you could have done better. The evidence is gone. The tree's cut. You can't patch it together and say you've undersold me by $12, 12%, that kind of thing. Whereas under optimising systems, similar to those of you who went to Campact, this is an optimising system, you get the ability to get, if you like, a 3D picture of your log, and then you cut it up virtually. And that tells you the potential value. No different where it's standing. Now we've got these stems, a tree on the ground with its branches off, we call stems. So stems, and then you come into log. So you saw in that first chart the variation that different operations can do in terms of converting trees into logs and how much value they can lose. Two other examples to reinforce that are trials that we have done, and not that many of these trials are done, but these are two live examples, where we have taken virtual stems that have been optimised, and then we've given them to an operational guy, now cut them up according to what you think is the best value. And in these two quite large studies, in an Australian example, they generated 22% less. So again, think back to that first chart, they were at that right-hand end where you don't want them to be. And then in another more recent example in Hawke's Bay, when people were cutting up the same stem to the optimised stem, they produced close to 12% less valuable logs. So the whole element of value recovery, as James has talked about, is a very, very real and significant financial payback to you guys if you get it right. And busy, but just a point as to why optimization. And when I say optimization, I'm talking about taking the full picture of your tree before you make a decision to cut it up. So your stem, just as you would for the tree in the forest. And this relates back to that Australian example where the guy on the machine, or the mechanical operator, the guy making the logs, was 22% less on average value than the optimised system. And this is almost at random, but if you consider $29 the difference between, this is exactly the same stem, and the little white lines that represent the saw cuts. This is what the optimised system would do. Then we would, and we've captured all this on the computer, then we turn this around and go to the harvesting guy and say, now you make your logs. Exactly the same cutting instructions, and we then recorded what he made, and we worked that back through the volume information here on the profile. And we, the forest owner, ended up with $29 less. One of it's busy, I know, but I suppose the two things you can see is that here is a decision here where the optimiser, because this is a defect, the optimiser said, I'm going to cut waste there. Whereas normal log makers, or the normal systems we use, you don't cut bits of waste halfway down your tree. You make a log, then you always make the next most valuable log. That's what's called priority cutting. Under optimised logging, it was actually more beneficial to cut out that bit of the waste and treat it as rubbish, because that meant that you could capture another value log straight after it. Where if you pulped it, which is making the least valuable log available to you, which he did in this instance here, he actually didn't have room at the end of the stem to make another log. So the unit impact was that he made less value, even though he cut the waste out of the middle of his tree. This is our most common way in New Zealand of making logs. These are very expensive pieces of machine, and as a general rule, the industry is moving to have more and more of these machines in forests. And there would be three common methods of making logs in New Zealand. One is basically manually, where guys with tapes and chainsaws spread the stems out on the ground and cut them into logs. This is, I would say, the most common method now, and this machine here, some of you would have seen some of these working, and they're very versatile machines. They can take the branches off, they keep the operator safe, they can, in Hawke's Bay conditions, if you gave it unlimited trees to cut up and they were in a perfect cutting environment, they could cut quite comfortably 1,000 tonne a day, one of these machines in an 8-hour shift. But what they aren't that great at is that they're only moderately good at making the right value decisions over your logs. So they can do a good job, but the more complex your market breadth becomes, the less good these machines become at recovering your value. So this is a model of the pan-pack type setup, very similar to what they've got operating currently. They've evolved this to another level. But these are the kind of systems that we have been involved in developing for our forests. So the fundamental process there, and quite different from the cutting up machine process, is that before a decision is made as to what log to make, our full stem features, diameter, length, deviation, has been assessed. So we now use computers and the current market prices to say, every single tree, computer, tell me what is the most valuable mix of our logs. One of the things, and again I think you people on the East Coast and Hawke's Bay are really, really fortunate in this, is the stemming process. Now it's a bit of complexity that I'll talk to you about later. But the development of this system here, of which Pan-Pack obviously had a large part playing, was capturing all the good bits about value recovery, capturing instant data access, and doing it productively. That system there has some failings. It's very good, but we think this is a better process, and this is now very similar to the bigger version of Pan-Pack farm. Now, the fundamental difference here, oops, I'm pushing the wrong way. That's frozen somehow. Can you,
The fundamental difference here is that this is the soaring component. Previously we had one of those $750,000.
The fundamental difference here is that this is the soaring component.
Solutions were wireless.
Previously we had one of those $750,000 machines doing the cutting up, and the log solutions were wirelessly transmitted to it.
So all that's done
Now we have
price
this
of these kinds of
arguably $30,000 saw doing a more accurate
and
job.
probably pretty accurate.
So all that's done is
So
put the
that
price of these kinds of
systems
systems down to, and probably improve the accuracy. So that in essence is a mini version of what those of you that went on the Pan-Pack field trip yesterday saw.
Now, obviously these are more complex than putting a cutting up machine on a truck and taking them out to the forest.
Now, obviously these are more complex
stemming
than putting a machine,
and-
cutting out a
and
machine on a truck and
carting
taking them out to the forest.
Trees on truck into the forest,
Um,
doing cutting
stemming
up in one location.
And carting
There's not
trees on
probably
truck into the
4 places
forest
in New
and
Zealand.
doing cutting up all in one location.
But it is all
There's not-
predicated on the
There's
side
probably 4 places in New Zealand where that happens,
capturing data sets available to
but it
the
is
forest
all
and
predicated on this idea of optimising value, capturing data so it's available to the forest owner and manager
James
data,
Barry has already
making the most
pointed
money out of
out,
your
it's
logs.
all about the dollars.
You've got to offset that, of course, with the costs of systems like that. And as James Parry has already pointed out,
this is what
it's
these
all about
kinds of
the dollars
systems
that
do.
you get to keep.
They are intended to maximise your log value, and you can explain why.
So this is what these kind of systems do.
And it's the data
They
availability.
are intended to maximise your log value, and you can explain why I see that is important.
When we bought
And it's
stumpage,
the data availability to you as forest managers and forest
say $1
owners.
million,
You need to know when we bought
couldn't afford
stumpage,
to wait till the end of the
we
half
were in the
to
hole
get
for,
generated
say, $1 million worth of pots. If we couldn't afford to wait till the end of the harvest to work out we only generated $800,000 worth of income, we had to know every day, are we meeting our targets? If not, we had to
now,
change something in the
version,
forest, change something in the market, to make sure that we got it.
process, which is
Now, in that second version, because we've taken out the most expensive part of the
safe, obviously.
process, which is the cutting up machine, it's now as the
People
same
on
price as
transport
any of the
cutting
alternatives.
That's the thing.
It's safe, obviously, and that's
the safety liabilities that's been mentioned now.
people on the chainsaws cutting lots.
Accurate
That's a thing of
way
the past.
to
Well, it soon will be with the safety liabilities that's been mentioned now. Even though that can be quite an accurate way of recovering your value, the safety factor.
One thing I like about
so it's
the
going to
campaign
come
system and our systems like this KBP kind of right.
One thing I like about
now
Pancake system and our system and systems like this KPP and Pangara
on the right of my
is that you've now got quite a stable process for adding new technology. You might notice on the right of my
and
slide,
they have developed
this thing here.
prototype.
Well, this is a smart Hawke's Bay company, Cumberland Systems.
QR
and they have developed
laser and dyeing,
prototype.
There was a question over here before about how can we be certain that the logs are ours? Well, it's information like that that you apply at the point of manufacture that will give you some more certainty, in addition to the traditional log dollars, which probably won't go away either.
Stemming as Pampac does it, it has lots of advantages, but it has disadvantages. If you cut 18 metres is the length of the stem that you can carve on a road, probably on average 24 metres is the length of the stem once you've felled it and dragged it into a landing out on forest. There are 6 metres of stem that can't be carted legally on the roads. That comes with a cost because you can't fully recover value if you're making a preemptive cut 18 metres down the stem. That aside, the advantages of things like stemming is that you guys get to control or aggregate. As soon as you start aggregating volume, you get scale effects, cheaper logging, cheaper transport. You get the ability to have a broader market mix that can cut out of your trees. If you've got lots of trees in one place, then you can afford to cut lots of cuts. If you've only got a small volume of trees coming in, you cannot accumulate a lot of grades. You have the ability, in a site like Pampac, to run your log manufacture 24/7. And that's a huge advantage in terms of scale benefits to them. Versus, you can't get anybody to work in the bush 24/7 who would want to.
You would almost say, why don't more people do this? I've painted value recovery and your ability to optimise and generate the most value as for me anyway, the singularly most important thing to get right if you're in it to make money. You've got a couple of articles of keeping people safe. If you don't have skin in the game, if you're not a forest owner, this becomes less important to you. Many of our forests in New Zealand, the forest owners are overseas, and it's managers that get to make these decisions about the forest. Simpler, easier, and lower cost are easier things for them to manage. I've said before, I've given you examples of how you can measure your value recovery loss, but those systems almost require spot trials and that kind of analysis. You can't actively measure, once you've cut a tree up, what it could have been. There's a lot of grey area in value recovery, and that makes it hard for businesses and managers to make commitments to it based on the fundamentals, as James and I have outlined. As well, there's an aversion to change. Pampac didn't go into 18 metre stemming lightly, but for them they had to do they had to have a different supply chain because their existing one wasn't working and they were facing regional council pressure to change. When export are high, and again this is a benefit of you guys that have your Hawke's Bay forests, where you've got a mix of domestic and export markets, then you are well suited You're well suited to pick the best bits of logs out of your trees, because they're going to generate more value to you. Optimising can do that for you. When export markets are particularly strong, the rough logs increase in value proportionately more than the good logs. So it's harder to tease out the value difference in very strong export markets. Rough logs come up proportionally more than good logs. So, in essence, you haven't dinged me yet, Russell, but I'm close to...
You've got 1 minute before the ding goes.
Okay. Well, I should have spot on. For me, as a past forest owner that would buy forest with real cash, with my house as mortgage at the back of it, I wouldn't do that without the benefits of using optimising systems. We worked with them at its outset, understood them, and we believed the only way we could get the value standing in our forest was through optimisation and using all good value recovery things. You've grown your forest for 28 years or thereabouts before you start cutting them down. You really, really, really only get one chance to convert those standing trees from their stems into logs. You've got to get that right. And pleasingly, where you guys are now, the way Roger people are managing it, you have time. You're not inheriting somebody else's systems and paradigms. You've got time to get it right. And so that's how we finish. You actually don't have any excuses for not getting it right. Thank you.